I'm not at Gen Con this year. I think I'm going to talk about game conventions in this video, just briefly. Feelings. As always, please like and subscribe, share with your friends, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I release a video, etc., etc. There's some cool links down there, including my Patreon, which has reached its first goal, which is amazing, so I'm super excited about that. I've been going to game conventions since I was like 16, I guess, maybe 15. My mom actually suggested that I do it because she wanted me to socialize and she knew I liked gaming, so she put two and two together. The first Origins a long time ago was in Philadelphia, which is where I grew up. So I went there, I played some games. I was really nervous and anxious teenager in general as far as socializing goes. And I don't remember everything I played, but I definitely played a vampire LARP, and I definitely played some D&D that I thought was kind of boring. You know, so I'm like 37, so I guess that's like over 20 years of going to game conventions. I've gone pretty much every year to different, and I've been to a lot of different game conventions. You know, I've been to Gen Con, Origins, Big Bad Con, Metatopia and Dreamation. I haven't been to too many West Coast conventions because it's expensive to get there. I've never been to Dragon Con, but I'm really into costuming. Those are, I guess, the main game conventions I've been to, and probably like a bunch of other adjacent conventions, of course. Like kink conventions and anime conventions and sci-fi conventions and stuff like that. But Gen Con is like the big game convention, right? It's actually not too far from me. It's like 3 hours away between Columbus and Indianapolis. And I've been a few times. Not as much as Origins. Origins is like the one that I ended up going to the most for whatever reasons. It was like easier to drive to from Philly, I guess, was pretty much it. And you know, it was like maybe 7 years ago or so that I went to Gen Con many years in a row, like maybe 5 years in a row. And I went mostly because a lot of my indie game friends were gonna be there, like from Story Games and The Forge, and they started a thing called Games on Demand, which allowed people to like volunteer and try out lots of different games that were kind of like in that same scene of people and independent publishers who were releasing small press games, which were things I was interested in, looking for like alternative games to a lot of the mainstream stuff that I was tired of playing, basically. That was super fun. You know, we're an awesome community. We hear a lot about harassment policies being written really well in our space, at least, and we worked really hard to keep those spaces as safe and welcoming as possible, which is hard to do at a giant convention with thousands of strangers. Like, it's just, you know, you write the rules the best you can, and that's one of the safest spaces I've ever experienced at a convention, to be honest. Because even in these small groups, you know, that we try to curate and manage as much as possible, and invite, you know, diverse people into and try to design the space so that it is welcoming and good for diverse people, inclusive and as safe as possible, right? You know, terrible people are always going to get in. You just can't avoid it. It's just like they exist, and you know, there's going to be problematic stuff, harassment, you know, homophobia, sexism, racism. It always comes up. It just, in any space, you know, it doesn't matter if it's at a game convention or a queer space or a kink space, like wherever. You know, it's gonna be there. It sucks. So I just think my tolerance for this over time, like, I find it, something in me finally got tired of it like 2 years ago. It was a combination of that, like having to basically having to wrestle with strangers who, you know, for whatever reason were acting in problematic, you know, or even abusive ways. You know, over time that that is hard to deal with in any community, you know. And I've been going to these conventions, you know, I'm a club goer, like I go to bars, and you know, your tolerance, my tolerance for it was pretty great for a while, you know, like for 20 years. That's not a bad run. You know, I learned techniques to shut down assholes and, you know, shut down come-ons and support other people and back other people up if I saw things happening. I learned how to report things to security or raise things to a higher level if needed. You know, all of those things that you learn, I guess, as a minority in group spaces. You know, and I do know those tools, and that's great. And a lot of times I'm fine in those spaces, but other times I'm just like, I'm just so tired. I just don't want to do that work. It's just like, fuck off. Oh my God. Just like, assholes, please go away. And you know, people exist in every community. Like you can't avoid them. And it's mostly white dudes. Although sometimes it's other people. So yeah, I just think it was a combination of not wanting to like run games for strangers anymore. Like, just not knowing who's gonna come and sit down at my table who I have to deal with for 4 hours, you know, who might not be bad enough to kick out of a game or kick out of a space, but it's just like hitting all my buttons and like just being inappropriate, you know. Yeah, that tolerance basically disappeared 2 years ago. I think it was combined with you know, my fibromyalgia. Like I basically don't have the physical capacity to run 4-hour games at a table anymore. Like I just, at a convention, I can't do it. Like leaning forward physically and shouting in a loud room, sitting down for that amount of time without being able to move my body around. It's just not conducive to me anymore. Fibromyalgia prevents me from doing that, and I can maybe run one of those now at a game convention, which means that I can't get enough volunteer hours to get a free badge, and badges are expensive. Like I can't afford to attend a convention if I have to pay for a badge. Even, you know, combined with whatever the travel is, the pain that I'm going to be experiencing from that, recovering, sleeping in a hotel bed, all of those things, like you know, for 20 years my body was fine with it, and now it just isn't, and I can't do it. And I can't imagine how people with, you know, even more mobility challenges than me kind of get around those spaces or even deal with that kind of environment. I imagine it just self-selects a lot of people out. And you know, I guess the last thing is that I just never really felt like Gen Con was for me. Like as a queer, non-binary person, I just never like was like, oh yeah, these are my people. Like, it's so big, which is fun. But that means that there's a lot more of kind of a mainstream audience there, which tends to just be kind of people who are not marginalized. And this is reflected, you know, in the Ennies, in the types of games that are present there, and in the events that end up being popular. You know, I don't really see myself in those things. I think this year, you know, ever since Ajit George, who's a friend of mine, has been working really hard to diversify the programming, who's invited, the system issues with Gen Con, I think it's gotten better. You know, this year Anita Sarkeesian is there. It's amazing. Just as one example. But overall, like, I go to the parties, and like, you know, the Kickstarter party is pretty good. Luke Crane is a great person. You know, but it's still like these dominant, straight, cis dude spaces, basically. And it's just, it's uncomfortable for me. It's not really super fun. And then you know, I'll find my people and I'll go off and do that thing, but I can find my people in other spaces and do that thing. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of weird being now like an industry professional and not going to Gen Con. It's basically like the big convention where people go to network and do business and stuff, and you know, it's the potential to have your stuff be the most visible at any of the award ceremonies, and to actually do business deals, blah blah blah. But you know, all those things I just mentioned, plus the expense, just makes it kind of impossible for me to go anymore. It's not something I want to go to. You know, the internet, I feel like I can find my people more easily, can communicate with people easily online. And it's just expensive. Like, if I can't volunteer to get a badge, I have to pay for the weekend badge. I have to pay for my part of a hotel if I can find people to stay with. I have to deal with all of my pain. You know, if I'm driving, I have to pay for daily parking, plus the gas, plus food. It's just like, it's a lot of money. It ends up being a lot, at least $500. So it's just kind of not in my life anymore, which kind of sucks. Anyway, I hope everyone at Gen Con is having fun. And you know, if it's not for me, it doesn't mean it's not for you. But yeah, that's my video. Thanks for watching my Gen Con rants. Do you still go to Gen Con? Do you have trouble getting to conventions for any of the reasons that I mentioned? Like, you know, dealing with strangers, or any kind of ability issues, or chronic pain issues, or money, or whatever? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have a discussion about it. And I'll see you next vid.